Here we are, staring at something that has troubled spiritual men and women for thousands of years. This battle with lust. And the strange thing is, the more awake you become, the more conscious of the divine, the fiercer this battle seems to grow. Why is that? Why should the person who seeks God most earnestly be the very one who wrestles most deeply with desire? Let me tell you what is happening here. And I must warn you, this is not the comfortable sermon you might expect. This is about seeing the whole picture, not just the parts we like to talk about in public. The first thing to understand is this: when you awaken spiritually, when you begin to see life as it truly is, you don't become less human. You become more human. You become more aware of everything. The divine, yes, but also the earthly, the sacred and the profane, the angelic and the animal. Think of it this way. Before awakening, you were like a person walking through life half asleep. Your senses were dulled. Your awareness was clouded. But awakening is like turning up the volume on everything. Suddenly you can hear the birds singing more clearly. You can taste your food more vividly. You can feel the sun on your skin with greater intensity. And yes, you can feel desire more powerfully too. This is the first reason. Spiritual sensitivity amplifies everything. When you open your spiritual eyes, you don't just open them to heaven. You open them to the full spectrum of human experience. The same sensitivity that lets you feel God's presence also makes you more aware of the body's yearnings. The same consciousness that perceives divine beauty also perceives earthly beauty with shocking intensity. The old religious teachers often missed this point. They thought awakening would make you less aware of the flesh, but it's exactly the opposite. A spiritually awake person feels everything more deeply: joy and sorrow, peace and restlessness, love and lust. The heightened state of awareness that comes with spiritual growth doesn't shut down your humanity. It turns up the dial on all of it. So here you are, a person seeking God, and suddenly you find yourself feeling desire more intensely than ever before. And you think something has gone wrong. You think you're falling backward. But actually, you're just becoming more alive, more aware, more fully human. The question is not how to stop feeling. The question is how to be with what you feel without being controlled by it. Now let's look at the second reason. And this one is painful to admit. Those who are spiritually awake often find themselves alone, not because they're better than others, but because they see things differently. They can't engage in the usual conversations anymore. The gossip feels hollow. The endless chatter about nothing feels unbearable. The obsession with status and money and appearances seems like children playing make-believe. And so they drift away from the crowd. Or the crowd drifts away from them. Either way, they end up alone. And loneliness is a very particular kind of hunger. When you have no one to share your thoughts with. When you have no one who understands the things you're seeing. When you're carrying visions and insights that others would think mad, you feel isolated in a way that cuts deep. Lust becomes a kind of bridge back to human connection. Even if it's false connection, even if it's empty connection, at least it's something. At least for a moment you're not alone. The body pressed against another body. The eyes meeting another's eyes. For that brief time, the terrible loneliness lifts. Do you see the trap? The very path that leads you closer to truth also leads you further from the crowd. And the human animal in you cries out for contact, for touch, for the warmth of another. Lust offers a counterfeit solution. It promises connection but delivers only more isolation. Because after the moment passes, you're still alone, often more alone than before. This is why so many spiritual seekers, so many monks and mystics and holy men and women throughout history have struggled in secret with desire. They withdrew from the world to seek God. And they found God, yes, but they also found crushing loneliness. And lust came knocking at the door of that loneliness, offering companionship, even if only for an hour. The third reason is perhaps the most mysterious. When you begin to wake up spiritually, you become a threat. Not to people necessarily, though sometimes to them too. But you become a threat to the forces that keep humanity asleep. Call them what you will. Demons, if you like. The powers of darkness. Or simply the momentum of unconsciousness that governs most human life. Whatever you call these forces, they do not want you awake. They do not want you seeing clearly. They do not want you spreading consciousness to others. And so they attack. They probe for weaknesses. They look for ways to pull you back into the dream, back into the trance, back into the endless cycle of grasping and wanting and never being satisfied. Lust is a magnificent weapon for this purpose. Why? Because it works. It really does pull people back into unconsciousness. When you're caught in the grip of lust, when desire is burning through you, you cannot think clearly, you cannot meditate, you cannot pray, you cannot rest in that quiet inner space where God speaks. You are pulled entirely into the body, into sensation, into the fever of wanting something right now. And so the attacks come, stronger and stronger as you grow in awareness. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're doing something right. You're waking up. And the forces of sleep do not give up their prisoners without a fight. This is what the scriptures mean when they speak of spiritual warfare. It's not a metaphor. It's not poetry. It's the actual experience of anyone who tries to live consciously in an unconscious world. The battle is real. The enemy is real. And lust is one of his favorite weapons because it works so terribly well. The fourth reason is about wounds. Old wounds. Deep wounds. Wounds we carry from childhood. From rejection. From betrayal. From all the ways life has hurt us before we even knew what was happening. Most people walk through life never looking at these wounds. They're too painful, too frightening. But when you begin to wake up spiritually, you start seeing them. You start feeling them. All the old pain rises to the surface. The abandonment, the shame, the fear of not being loved, the conviction that you're not enough. And here's what happens. Lust offers to soothe these wounds. It offers a temporary balm. When you're in the grip of desire, when you're pursuing or being pursued, you forget the pain for a while. You feel wanted. You feel alive. You feel like maybe, just maybe, you are enough after all. But it's a lie. Lust doesn't heal wounds. It just covers them up for a moment. Like putting a bandage on a festering sore without cleaning it first. The infection remains and often grows worse because now you've added shame to the wound. Now you've added the knowledge that you're using people, or being used, or both. Now you've added another layer of pain on top of the original pain. The spiritually awake person sees all of this. They see the wound. They see the lust rising to cover it. They see the shame that follows. They see the whole cycle. And seeing it doesn't make it stop. Sometimes seeing it makes it worse. Because now you're aware of what you're doing even while you're doing it. You're conscious of the trap, even as you step into it. Healing these old wounds requires something else entirely. It requires facing them, sitting with them, letting them be felt without running away into distraction or comfort or false connection. This is hard work, the hardest work there is. And many people, even spiritually awakened people, would rather battle lust than do this deeper work of healing. Because at least lust offers moments of pleasure, however brief. The work of healing offers only pain, at least at first. The fifth reason is the most paradoxical of all. The very gifts that make you spiritually powerful also make you vulnerable. When you have heightened sensitivity, when you can feel the divine presence, when you can sense the interconnection of all things, you're operating at a very high frequency. Your consciousness is expanded. Your awareness is vast. But you're still in a body. You're still flesh and blood. You're still subject to all the drives and hungers and needs of the animal self. And here's the strange thing. The higher your consciousness rises, the stronger the pull downward becomes. It's as if the universe seeks balance, as if the very expansion of your spiritual nature creates an equal and opposite pull toward the purely physical. This is why so many spiritual teachers, so many gifted healers and prophets and visionaries have fallen into scandals of the flesh. Not because they were hypocrites, not because their spiritual gifts were fake, but because the combination of high spiritual power and unguarded physical nature creates a dangerous situation. Like a tall building without a foundation. The higher it rises, the more catastrophic the fall. The answer to this is discipline. But not the grim teeth-gritting kind of discipline that feels like punishment. Rather, the discipline of tending to the whole self, spirit and body, mind and flesh. You cannot just soar in the spiritual realms and ignore the needs of the body. You cannot just pray and meditate and expect the physical nature to take care of itself. The body needs to be honored, fed properly, exercised, given rest, given healthy touch and connection, given creative expression. When these needs are met in healthy ways, lust has less power. When they're ignored or denied, lust becomes overwhelming because it's trying to fill too many holes at once. So what do we do with all of this? How do we live with this strange combination of heightened spiritual awareness and powerful physical desire? First, we stop pretending the battle doesn't exist. We stop acting as if spiritual people are supposed to float above all this earthly messiness. The flesh is real. Desire is real. And fighting a real enemy requires acknowledging it's there. Second, we stop fighting alone. The isolation I spoke of earlier is part of the trap. Lust thrives in secrecy. It grows in darkness. When we can find even one other person to be honest with, someone who won't judge us but will stand with us, the power of lust begins to break. Not because confession is magic, but because isolation is what feeds the beast. Third, we attend to the wounds. This means sitting with the pain instead of running from it. This means feeling the loneliness instead of medicating it with false connection. This means looking at the old rejections and abandonments and letting them be seen and acknowledged. It's painful work, but it's the only work that actually heals. Fourth, we practice presence with our desire without acting on it. This is perhaps the hardest practice of all. When lust rises, the instinct is to either indulge it or suppress it. Both of these are forms of violence. Indulging it leads to shame and emptiness. Suppressing it leads to explosion later. The middle way is to simply be present with the feeling. To feel the heat of desire without having to do anything about it. To notice how it rises and falls like a wave. To observe it the way you might watch a storm from a safe place. This takes tremendous courage. But it's in this space of presence without action that real transformation happens. Not because you're fighting the desire, but because you're neither fighting it nor feeding it. You're just watching it. And in the watching, something shifts. Finally, we remember that we are not this battle. We are not the desire or the shame or the struggle. We are the awareness within which all of this arises. Like the sky that watches the weather pass through, the storms come and go, the clouds gather and disperse, but the sky remains unchanged. When you can rest in this awareness, even for a moment, the battle loses its power to define you. Yes, lust may still arise. Yes, the struggle may continue, but you're no longer identified with it. You're no longer convinced that this struggle is who you are. The spiritually awake struggle with lust not because they're failing, but because they're awake enough to feel the full force of being human. They're sensitive enough to feel every current, every drive, every hunger. And they're isolated enough to face these things often without support or understanding. But this struggle, as painful as it is, can become a teacher. It can show us where we're wounded and need healing. It can reveal our need for real human connection, not false substitutes. It can humble us, reminding us that we're not as far above the flesh as we might like to think. And it can deepen our compassion for every other human being struggling with their own desires and weaknesses. The battle with lust is not a sign that you're spiritually failing. It's often a sign that you're spiritually growing. Growing into a fuller awareness of what it means to be both spirit and flesh, both divine and animal, both awakened and still very much in the process of learning what that awakening means. So be gentle with yourself. Be honest about the struggle. Seek help when you need it. Attend to your wounds. Practice presence with your desires without being controlled by them. And remember, always remember, that you are not alone in this battle. Every mystic, every saint, every truly awakened person has walked this same difficult path. The flesh is weak, yes, but the spirit, when properly attended to, is stronger than any temporary desire. And the awareness that watches both flesh and spirit is stronger still.